Hello everyone. The next league, Keepers of the Flame, is centered around a revamp for Breach and introduces a new crafting system, secondary ascendancy classes, hull-borne items, and up to 2 slots for Grafts. These league-specific items have various modifiers and provide powerful abilities that don't scale with player stats. Examples include the Great Avalanche, which summons 40 minions that can inflict brittle, or Enervating Grasp, which creates orbs that zap enemies on contact. All the Pyre summons pillars that cover enemies in ash when attacking, and Wreathed in Light summons Radiant Ground, granting your minions added lightning damage and makes their hits lucky. This is pretty cool because it's flat added damage as well as a generic source of lucky damage with hits that doesn't block the amulet slot like Perkwold's Toe and could replace the Perfect Spirit of Fortune in minion builds that already have a source of wrath. All of the aforementioned buffs and debuffs are valuable additions and otherwise hard to access for minion builds. These grafts are grown on the Genesis tree, which can be found in the Monastery of the Keepers. It can also grow implants, which are used to modify grafts, and Fall-born currency, which are upgraded versions of existing currency items. Investment into the tree allows you to grow Fall-born uniques, which can have multiple of the modifiers replaced with a new one. The tree can't grow drop-specific uniques. The items like Replica Dragonfang's Flight could be interesting as long as they retain the most important modifiers. Last but not least, you can also craft irregular items with it while having a measure of control over the modifiers similar to grave crafting in 3.24. All of these items require graft blood and new breach specific drops, which you'll get instead of splinters from the revamped mechanic. The secondary ascendancy classes can be unlocked by killing specific endgame bosses, and the passives can be allocated with ascendancy passive points. This means there's a trade-off between the regular and the secondary ascendancies, which might not be worth for the Necromancer or the Guardian since they already have 4 or even 5 powerful notables that you want to invest into. This is now more true than ever because spell suppression has been nerfed to 40% reduced spell damage taken, which means block-based approaches utilizing Bastion of Hope or Mistress of Sacrifice in combination with Bone Offering are much better in comparison. 3 of the ascendancies that will be available have some potential for minion builds. Primal Roar from Ferul's Bloodline has some niche use cases for minion builds that feature a large number of minions and want extra attack speed. The minion damage component does require the usage of war cries like Enduring or Rallying Cry to be active, and the uptime is usually only 50% due to cooldowns. Umbral Army from Katarina's Bloodline can use to increase player defenses per summoned Spectre. This is especially powerful for pure Spectre builds, which can easily use 8 or 9 Spectres later on for total defense increase of 96 to 108%. Last but not least, Bitter Heresy from Lykeia's Bloodline can be used to turn Consecrated Ground into amped up Profane Ground. Not only does this provide 100% increased critical strike chance and 10% increased curse effect, but also Malediction to enemies and Chaotic Might to your minions. These effects are very powerful and usually hard to introduce into minion builds. While Profane Ground is accessible via a combination of Zandavith's Cassock and Broken Faith on the AG, no such thing exists for Malediction. Since you want to use Kingmaker on your AG at some point, this is a great way of retaining Profane Ground in higher budget environments, while also getting access to Malediction and Chaotic Might. It does require you to generate Consecrated Ground, and the easiest way to do that is by using Purifying Flame, potentially in a trigger setup or linked to an Arcanist brand for automation. Spectres now linger after dying and will resurrect upon entering a new area. This means you no longer need to rebuy expensive itemized specters after death, similar to the AG change that was introduced last week. However, they remain dead in the same instance, so your build will perform less optimal for the remainder of the map or boss fight. For pure Spectre builds, this changes little since they can't function without the Spectres and have to either abandon the instance or resummon all of the Spectres, which is usually preferable. All attack-based minions have received a buff, since minion accuracy has been removed from the game. They now always hit, which means accuracy is no longer needed, and precision is now less relevant, especially for chaos-based minion builds. The minion accuracy nodes on the tree have been changed, with the Brave Pact nodes providing chaos resistance and minion damage. The accuracy nodes next to Spiritual Commander have been changed as well and will now provide minion damage. There are no other changes to minions in general, but BAMA specifically was nerfed hard. The clones deal 20 to 33% less damage and now have a base duration of 5 instead of 20 seconds. Due to the reduced base duration, Fresh Meat support now has a base duration of 0.5 seconds, which isn't enough to sustain it even with investment into minion and skill effect duration. Since the duration of the clones is now shorter, you would still have to invest in cooldown recovery and spam the skills like before, but with a hefty reduction in damage. Combining the gem nerf and the replacement of fresh meat with the next best support gem, the overall reduction in damage will be anywhere between 25 to 50%. Since spell suppression, BAMA's main defense against spells, was nerfed as well, it will no longer be the top dog in the minion meta and cede this position to Frostbearer and ranged weapon builds. Which brings me to the next segment, the actual league starters. The PoBs of the following builds include passive trees and campaign skill guides for players unfamiliar with minion leveling, but I won't go over them in detail here. I recently optimized them, so they should be more on point in general, but specifically in terms of mana reserving abilities. I also included an absolution leveling setup for the Necromancer and 2 builds for those unwilling to put up with SRS, like myself. And with that, the first build I'd like to present is Dominating Blow Guardian. This build is a melee minion hybrid that features duration-based minions with a decent single target damage and amazing clear speed. The main drawback besides the range restriction is that it takes a while to get to the maximum number of minions while fighting bosses, and that you have to refresh the minion's duration by frequently hitting enemies. Tough rare monsters can also completely brick your map since you can't summon new sentinels from a rare monster unless you kill it. The build has to be leveled as Absolution or SRS until you can access the skill gem in Act 3. Dominating Blow is a melee attack that has a hit-based component that deals damage and afflicts enemies with a debuff that transforms their corpse into a sentinel. Dominance if killed within a second. In addition to that, the skill also has a 25% chance to summon a sentinel when hitting a unique enemy, which enables bossing with this build. The maximum amount of normal sentinels of dominance is 9, whereas the Val version can hold 3 charges and allows you to ascend up to 3 sentinels. The regular sentinels have a melee attack, use shield charge to close the gap, and can use an AoE ability that has a 5-second cooldown. In addition to the 9 normal sentinels, you can also have 3 magic and 1 rare sentinel while doing map-like content. These sentinels will inherit the modifiers from the enemies they spawn from, including powerful mods like Auras or Soul Eater. If that wasn't enough, you can use the Behead support gem, which grants more damage against enemies on low life, and allows the minion that dealt the killing blow to gain 1 modifier from a rare enemy for 20 seconds, which can be refreshed by killing more enemies. This is even more relevant for the Ascendant Sentinels because they take 70% less damage, do 200% more damage, and have powerful AoE abilities. The Val skill always ascends the rare sentinel first, followed by the magic sentinels, and only in the absence of those will it choose normal ones. They also inherit the modifier from the sentinel before the ascension, which in combination with the mod granted from Behead support will significantly increase clear speed and even boss kills in map-like content. The Ascendant Sentinels have a base duration of 30 seconds and can be refreshed by using Val Domination again, which is possible due to the low soul gain prevention timer. I recommend the physical version because you want to use Unwavering Faith for increased mana reservation efficiency instead of Unwavering Crusade for the elemental relics. This allows you to use an additional reservation ability like Flesh and Stone that can be used to either increase survivability or damage by toggling between blood and sand stance. Since you're constantly hitting enemies, you can make use of Holy Relic, which will grant you and your minions additional life regen. This also allows you to use the Scourge, which is a great starting unique for Dominating Blow because it requires a melee weapon function. The other items you need are rares with life, resistances, and attributes. You can throw in Skullhead for additional minion survivability and a Shaper Influence Shield with percent life recovery on block to help with recovery early on. The Jinx Juju helps mitigate hit-based damage and should be anointed with Decay Ward for minion survivability. In the low budget, I recommend Martyr's Teaching because it scales minion damage while also enabling attack skills. Aegis Aurora provides even more recovery and better defenses than a rare shield and should be prioritized as an upgrade. A rare helmet with +2 levels of minion skill gems, reservation efficiency and minion movement speed as implicits round out the build. For the flasks, you want to get a life flask that removes bleeding and corrupted blood, roomies for armor and block chance, a quicksilver flask for movement speed, a basil flask for even more armor, and last but not least, an amethyst flask with the appropriate suffix for elemental and chaos resistance. The Cobalt jewels should feature life and minion damage, whereas the Ghastly Eye jewels should have life, minion attack, speed, taunt. The AG should have Relentless Fury for Cunning Strike, Clear Cast for increased minion damage, Rainbow Stride for spell block, Searing Exarch Influence Gauntlets for Intimidate, and Xandathis' Cassock in combination with Broken Faith for Profane Ground. For the Spectres, you want to use the Punch and Host Chieftain for Frenzy and Power Charges, as well as the perfect Forest Warrior for Onslaught and Culling Strike. For the Grafts, I recommend one with the Great Avalanche for Brittle, as well as one with Enervating Grasp for Zap. Next up is Elemental Carrion Golem Guardian. It's a classic that features permanent minions that have decent single target damage and clear speed. The Guardian gets access to all offensive elemental auras later on, which makes this a viable alternative to the poison version on the Necromancer. Minion survivability and player recovery is a bit worse, but it makes up for that by being overall much tankier and not reliant on the gear poison minion builds need. The main drawback is the cost of the primordial jewels, so keep that in mind when you evaluate this build. Initially, you have to play as Absolution or SRS, because golems are not viable until you get at least a Clay Shaper and allocate Golem Commander. The gem used here is Summon Carrion Golem of Scavenging instead of the base gem, because the golems deal 25% more damage with their multi-attack and can consume a corpse to heal themselves. This also enables the use of Empowered Cascade, which has more damage in AoE than the base version, and thus greatly increases their speed. This build also uses zombies because the golems need 10 non-golem minions in their vicinity to deal maximum damage. The zombies replace the specters in the utility minion setup, so they are toggled aggressive and thus stay in the golem's vicinity without the player having to attack or move in closely. The specters are placed in the shield charge setup and linked to elemental army for additional maximum elemental resistances. This also allows them to inflict elemental exposure, and since they deal triple split elemental damage, they can inflict multiple types of exposure with successive attacks. The gear is comparable to the first build, with Clay Shaper replacing the weapon in both setups. You also need minion uniques and rare items with life, resistances, and attributes. In the low budget, you want to replace the 6-linked corrupted body armor with replica covenant for flat added cold damage. The additional energy shield cost isn't all too relevant, since the golems are permanent minions and only have to be replaced on death. This build can also make use of a +2 minion helmet, as well as Aegis Aurora, since it doesn't spend much mana and thus isn't reliant on Eldritch Battery. The flasks are comparable to the first build as well. The gems, however, are completely different. In order to play the build optimally, you will need to get a set of primordial jewels and an anima stone as soon as possible. You should also get primordial might to increase clear speed and quality of life mapping. The AG is somewhat similar to the one from Dominating Blow. The main difference is Legacy of Fury instead of Rainbow Stride, so it can inflict Scorch on nearby enemies. The gloves should also feature fire exposure on hit as an additional implicit to guarantee good uptime of fire exposure. This is more of a precaution than true necessity, but since the Spectres deal more cold and lightning damage than fire damage, this should still be a valuable addition. For the Spectres, I recommend the Carnage Chieftain for frenzy charges, as well as the perfect Hulking Miscreation and the perfect Blasphemer for their respective buffs. And for the Grafts, I recommend one with Wreathed in Light for Radiant Ground, as well as one with the Great Avalanche for Brittle. Unlike the other builds on this list, the Carrion Golem Guardian can actually make good use of Bloodline Ascendencies, since it doesn't have enough points to reach Unwavering Faith, while Radiant Faith is in itself kind of weak. Umbral Army and the passive point from Katarina's Ascendancy will provide additional minion life and more defenses than Radiant Faith. Even more interesting would be Bitter Heresy from Lycia's Bloodline once you've replaced the AG's weapon and shield with Kingmaker. By replacing automation in the Molten Shell setup with Purifying Flame, you can keep Profane Ground while also getting access to the modifiers from Kingmaker, Increased Curse Effect, Malediction, and Chaotic Might as well. That's around 20% more damage and around 10% reduced damage taken compared to just Kingmaker for the price of Molten Shell automation. The runner-up is Poison Holy Relic of Conviction Necromancer. It's a unique permanent minion that requires the player to attack in order to trigger a powerful Nova at the location of the nearest enemy. It has decent single target damage and great clear speed. The main downside is the active playstyle, since you constantly have to trigger the minion's ability. While it is possible to get the base gem at the beginning of Act 1, it's advisable to play this as another build before switching to Holy Relic of Conviction for a number of reasons. The base gem has a maximum of 1 relic, and the novas are triggered around the minion instead of targeting the nearest enemy. It's also hard to trigger the nova on cooldown since the ability that this build uses for that purpose is a transfigured gem as well, and is thus not available early on. The skill in question is Lancing Steel of Spraying, which will saturate the trigger condition if you link it to returning projectiles due to the large number of projectiles generated. These projectiles can also be used as a source of recovery via life gain on hit support, and to inflict withered stacks via Withering Touch to consistently get the full 15 stacks. The gear is slightly different from the previous builds. The first item you need to get is Joffrey's Crest for +1 maximum number of relics, which boosts DPS by 50%. You can start using it from level 53 onwards, and it's rather affordable. You should also use a sword rolled with Shrieking Essences of Fear and minion attack and cast speed as a crafted modifier, which is necessary because Lancing Steel requires a sword or axe to be usable. For the low budget, you want to get Aegis Aurora for ES recovery on block, just like before. This allows you to rapidly recover both types of hit points and will make the build incredibly survivable, even compared to the other builds. You can also make use of the Covenant and Severed in Sleep or United in Dream later, since the Nova has 250% effectiveness for flat added damage. Additional chance to poison for minions can be accessed via a combination of chance to poison support and Ghastly Eye Jewels, which can be amplified by Darkness Enthroned if necessary. The flasks are comparable to the previous builds. The jewels, you should get as many Ghastly Eye Jewels with life and poison chance as it takes to get to 100% chance to poison, and fill the remaining sockets with Cobalt Jewels with life or resistances and minion damage. The AG is similar to the first build, but should use Windscream and Asenath's Gentle Touch, so it can explode enemies and curse them with temporal chains on hit, which will lower enemy DPS and increase poison duration on them. For the Spectres, I recommend the Carnage Chieftain for frenzy charges, the Perfect Hulking Miscreation for the buff, and the Pale Seraphim for the debuff. For the Grafts, I recommend one with the Great Avalanche for Brittle, as well as one with Enervating Grasp for Zap. The top spot goes to Poison Rage Animate Weapon Necromancer again. I played this last league, and while I didn't really enjoy 3.26, the build is still top notch. It features ranged and aggressive minions with a long duration that offer great clear speed and amazing single target DPS. The downsides are that you have to use Bladefall to generate lingering blades, which you then have to animate with the main skill, and the minions despawning on loading screens, including death. It has to be leveled as SRS or Absolution until you can access Unleash support at the end of Act 4. Before that, the summoning process is simply too slow for the campaign. Animate Weapon of Ranged Arms is a transfigured gem that you can get from lab or trade and should be prioritized since it's much better than the base gem. For the League start, you want to use a Convoking one rolled with Shrieking Essences of Fear and Minion attack and cast speed as a crafted modifier, in addition to the usual rares and uniques. The low budget is comparable to the Holy Relic build, with the exception of the helmet, which is more comparable to the Dominating Blow or Carrion Golem build. Just like with Holy Relic, you can use Severed in Sleep and later United in Dream for Envy. Additional chance to poison for minions can be added as necessary, just like I mentioned before. For the jewels, you should use Cobalt Jewels with life and minion damage, as well as Ghastly Jewels with life and poison chance for minions. The flasks and the AG are comparable to the Holy Relic build. Well, for the Spectres, you should use a Carnage Chieftain for frenzy charges, the Perfect Hulking Miscreation for the buff, and the Perfect Forest Warrior for onslaught as well as Culling Strike. And for the Grafts, I recommend one with Reefed in Light for Radiant Ground, as well as one with Enervating Grasp for Zap. Generally speaking, I try to come up with a mix of Chaos and non-Chaos builds, so not all of them depend on Severed in Sleep or United in Dream. Since Breach is getting completely revamped, the availability of Severed in Sleep and United in Dream, which can no longer be upgraded from the base unique via the Blessing, is somewhat questionable right now. I expect at least Severed in Sleep to be somewhat accessible though, and while United in Dream is obviously better for poison builds, they will do fine as long as they have a source of level 25 Envy and some poison chance for minions. If Severed in Sleep is too expensive as well, Holy Relic and Animate Weapon have to be played similar to the League Start setups. Either way, these 4 builds should cover a variety of different starting conditions and player preferences without sacrificing damage or defenses. The Bloodline Ascendencies we've seen so far will most likely only benefit the Carrion Golem build, because the others struggle to give up even a single Ascendancy notable. They will become more interesting in higher budget environments where you can use Bloodline notables plus the Forbidden Jewels to allocate one of the base Ascendancy notables. This represents an alternative to the more commonly used Forbidden Jewels, which can sometimes be insanely expensive. And that's pretty much it for my Minion League starters. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can leave them in the comments. I try to get to them as soon as I can. I hope you liked it. Have a great league start.